Hello, I'm Tom Ferguson and welcome to The Fundamental Molecule. This show explores the intersection of water, technology, and entrepreneurship. Each week, I interview innovators, experts, entrepreneurs, and investors in the world of water, helping us understand where this trillion-dollar industry is headed. These are the stories of the people building the future of the world's most valuable and fundamental resource.
Disclaimer. Tom Ferguson is the managing partner of Virgin Island Ventures. All opinions expressed by Tom and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Virgin Island Ventures. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be viewed as investment advice or relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.
The saying, "Those who tell the stories rule the world," is such a core truth that it is both a quote from Plato and a Native American proverb. Two entirely distinct societies coming to the same conclusion. We in water know that our inability to tell our story is one of the most frustrating aspects of the sector, and one of, if not the, most negatively impactful. So what happens when you put water story in the hands of two of the best storytellers and creators on the planet? Matt Fitzgerald is the campaign architect of TEAMWATER, which after TEAMTREES and TEAMSEAS is the third major campaign from MrBeast, the world's largest YouTuber, and Mark Robert, the world's most prominent science YouTuber. TEAMWATER's aim is to mobilize $40 million in 1 month in order to provide 2 million people with clean, safe, reliable drinking water for decades. It is one seriously entrepreneurial undertaking. And Matt is a remarkable guy, and we thought it would be fascinating to sit down with him and find out how he thinks about pulling off something this audacious. And we were right. It was. Please enjoy my conversation with Matt Fitzgerald. Matt, it is really good to see you. You are a busy man. How are you doing?
You know, I'm surprised that we found this time, but it's a great time to be talking.
I'm thank you very much for clearing what must be a completely insane schedule. I'm going to drop you into the middle of that schedule. And I'm going to ask you, because we need to really start from base principles, what is a campaign and what are the hallmarks of a good campaign?
Well, a campaign is sort of what I've been doing my whole professional life. And to get a usable answer for other people, I'd say that it's bringing people together to shift something that they want to see changed. Usually there's a decision maker or there's sort of a critical mass of the public who could make something happen that isn't currently happening. And so it's really just like a directed effort to make that change. And what that usually looks like in a way that's comprehensible to most people is like, you know, you elect a president or you try to change a law. In advertising, they talk about campaigns, but they really just mean running ads and running a bunch of them in integrated ways across different platforms. But I come from the movement building side of things, the cause advocacy side of things, where we're trying to improve society in a way that resonates with those of us working on the campaign. There's a whole craft and sort of practitioner community on the left and the right and the center. Everyone's trying to figure out how do we change society to be better in our own value system, and that's the battleground.
You brought up a really interesting theme that I would immediately use. You reference ad campaigns. Like the success of an ad campaign is number go up, sell more thing. But for you, in terms of the success of a campaign, I guess it's probably more nuanced. I mean, we're going to get onto TEAMWATER. Of course we are. But within a campaign, I mean, part of it is the fundraising, but part of it is improving awareness or whatever the kind of vector it is that you're trying to kind of influence. How do you think about the nuances of the outcome in terms of judging success?
This is one of the hardest things to evaluate. I think in the private sector, you talk about having a single bottom line. It's like you're making money or you're losing money. You might have a longer and more patient capital, but at the end of the day, like the check's clear or they don't. I think in the sort of social sector, when you're thinking about shifting power or trying to promote environmental action or delay environmental action, as my opponents often are, you find that like it might be a dimension of awareness. It might be public participation. It might be a particular lawmaker who has their finger on whether or not your bill even gets a vote or not. It may be a whole structural change that could shift an entire industry's future. Part of planning a campaign is thinking about what's really important to you, who has the ability to make it happen, and who should have more agency, more ability, more power in order to create the change that you're looking for. ideally, you're lining those things up towards a measurable outcome. But what you often find is that much like any metric that you manage towards can become diluted and less effective as people become aware of it. We find that like you try to move something forward with other people involved, they push back. And so you'll have reaction and counter campaigns. It all happens at the same time. It's dynamic and it's human. And people have been jockeying for power and prestige and privilege to help each other for as long as people have been recording history. So I think it's part of like living on the edge and trying to shape a better future for each other.
The second question I had about wanting to kind of set the stage here, because it's something that's a particular bugbear of mine within the water sector. We have some good storytellers, but they are few and far between, Matt. How do you think about story resonance in the context of a campaign? What makes a good story? How do you think about narrative as you're setting up anything from what you're choosing to work on, what your campaign is around, to how you're going to establish resonance, what kind of assets you're going to be using, whatever it might be? Like, what is the role of story? What makes a good story?
The campaigns that I work on, we always try to have the supporters be either heroes themselves or heroes in community with the other supporters, like other participants. I think participation is the key, helping people to tap into their own agency and their own motivations in order to feel that they're making a difference. If you can do that, then really like a lot of possibilities and doors open. If you can't do that, then what you have is like staff sending emails and text messages to people. Those people do not want to receive more text messages or more emails. A campaign really relies on organizing, which is about relationships. And then what we think of as mobilization moments, where it's not just the people that you've sat down and broke bread with who are showing up for you. It's their friends and their friends of friends and their business networks, all of these people showing up you've never met. And that would be like, oh, we had a big day of action. We had a big rally. We had a launch day and it was bigger than any of us expected. That would be mobilization. And then it's usually a question of absorption. So these people you never met before, they turned up, they turned out. What do you have for them to do next? First impressions go a long way. Can you channel their enthusiasm or do you let it dissipate? Do they feel a sense of agency and purpose from that interaction? Or are they just like, man, I thought this time would be different and now it wasn't? The best campaigns will have sort of a rollout where they're building relationships, then they activate those relationships for this big moment. Then when they get a lot more people in the door, they're giving them a next step, something to do next. And they're sort of ratcheting up of activation and relationship. And that all of that pushes towards the goal that you're orienting around. That would be part of the dynamics of a great campaign.
Really interesting. Super helpful. So what is TEAMWATER? Explain it to us flat. Like, what is going on? Like, what are you building?
TEAMWATER is the largest creator collaboration in support of clean water ever. It is a $40 million crowdfunding campaign to bring clean water to 2 million people around the world for decades. It's led by MrBeast and Mark Rober, who are two of the biggest YouTubers in the world. It is powered by a team of digital content creators, YouTubers, TikTokers, Twitch streamers, and their audiences. And together, we've teamed up with a lead global partner in WaterAid, who's delivering this water infrastructure, as well as 3 implementation partners around the world, ranging from Dig Deep in the United States to the Loke Institute in Brazil and Give Power, which is also around different countries in the world. And together, we are TEAMWATER. Basically, we're inviting the world to join us on this mission to get clean water to 2 million people who don't have it right now, and also to activate the world's biggest clean water campaign, because we think that public participation has been missing when it comes to achieving the global goals as they relate to water.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. We really are very behind. It's such an amazing thing to have created. Can you just give us an idea of what the last few months have been? Because obviously you have these things take an enormous amount of preparation. And then, you launched relatively recently. Remind me, it was about a week ago?
We launched on August 1st at 9 a.m. Pacific. And since then, we've raised over $15 million towards the $40 million goal. We've organized creators from 145 countries to make content ranging from short video clips to long form videos. Gamers are streaming to their audiences and fundraising live for 24 hours. People are designing video games about water. People are making songs for kids about water. People are making cakes that look like creators who are organizing for water. Basically, it's just like this explosion of creativity and the internet doing what it does best, which is taking a simple idea that people get excited about and then putting a twist on it that makes it unique and shareable and emotionally resonant. And I think that's where we come in by all of the hard work that you referenced, like that happens behind the curtain. Once we put it out in front of the public, we want it to be so simple, so drop dead obvious that you'd have to be silly to not support this. And what we're seeing is an amazing outpouring of support. But right now it's a viral good news story happening live on the internet near you, wherever your screens are. But also, I bet if you go ask like your favorite 10-year-old kid, hey, what's MrBeast doing about clean water? They're going to know exactly what you're talking about. And they're probably going to like spit some facts at you.
That is absolutely excellent. So it's funny, immediately as you say that, I was wondering what the crossover between MrBeast audience and the people, I guess, the mainstream within kind of water and water technology and the people that we're used to dealing with, and how many of them are actually aware of MrBeast, his reach. Just give us, so MrBeast and Mark Rober, just give us an idea of the reach. What is the scale that we're talking about here in terms of the distribution of this message? Some people will be aware of the size of their audience and the potential impact just in terms of the distribution engine of an idea like this and this kind of scale of change. But just treat me as if I have no idea about anything. Just explain to me exactly who these two people are and what kind of network it is that you're starting with and then devolving out from kind of those two starting points.
So I started working with them back in 2019. And at the time, I think between the two of them, they had about 30 million subscribers, maybe a bit more. Now, MrBeast, across his different content channels, including 5 YouTube channels, I think he's the third biggest TikToker in the world, among other things. But at this point, I think he's got about north of 800 million followers. So that would be about 1 in every 10 people on the planet.
That is so insane.
I don't expect that grownups my age or older necessarily know who he is. But if you have kids and you bring up MrBeast, they absolutely know who he is. Mark Rober is a former NASA scientist, former Apple engineer turned YouTuber. He actually designed the jetpack parachute that lowered the Mars rover to the surface of the planet. And it was so good that even after he left NASA, they reused the design when they went back to Mars. Mark went from going to NASA to becoming the biggest science creator on the internet, sort of the global Bill Nye, the science guy, but for this generation. And working with them as co-founder to TEAMTREES and TEAMSEAS and TEAMWATER now has been just the coolest thing I've done in my career outside of organizing big things with the climate movement in solidarity with like youth organizers from Tuvalu and the Maldives.
You just alluded to it, right? TEAMWATER is the third in this series. You've had TEAMTREES and TEAMSEAS. I just want to work on this progression of execution against these amazing campaigns and take us back to the beginning because it was trees first, right?
That's right. I had met them when they sort of wanted to do almost like an ice bucket challenge for trees. At the time, MrBeast had just hit 20 million subscribers and he was known for sort of marking these subscriber milestones by doing stunts. It would be like giving away 3 million pennies to his 3 million subscriber or something. When he hit 20, he asked his audience how he should celebrate. And someone on Reddit, the post is still up, someone on Reddit suggested that he plant 20 million trees. Someone on Twitter suggested that he team up with Mark Rober, presumably because they thought that Mark would design a drone army to plant the trees. And together, they started thinking about this challenge. They started working on it behind the scenes. And I was introduced to them because I think someone at YouTube introduced the concept of a campaign manager, not a project manager. A project manager takes a plan you already have and makes sure that the trains run on time. A campaign manager, like elects presidents. And so like,
it's a different beast.
Yeah, there's strategy. Obviously calling it a manager kind of undersells what is essentially a $1 billion startup in the presidential context. In my context, the budgets aren't quite that large, but the scale is at that size. Working with these guys back in 2019, we had a $20 million crowdfunding goal to plant 20 million trees. Through $1 plants 1 tree with the Arbor Day Foundation. None of us knew how it would work. my only benchmarks were like the presidential primaries that were going on at the time. And I looked at the campaign finance reports, like the quarterly fundraising targets. And I was like, okay, so this would be about a Joe Biden at the time.
It's one Joe Biden as a really unit of.
Yeah. And this would be in 2 months as opposed to 3 months for the finance reports. I said, hey, Mark, how much would you actually need to be happy with this untested model of internet fundraising? And he was like, $5 million. I was like, cool. And you're not going to be mad at me if we raise $5 million out of 20? He's like, probably not. I was like, it's good enough.
Probably.
So
You're doing an awful lot of work there.
what I was doing was mapping their audience onto the movement building sort of templates that I'd experienced and been a part of shaping, sort of what was cutting edge organizing and digital marketing in the climate movement. What could that look like approaching the creator economy? All of these YouTube channels and TikTok accounts and Twitch streaming accounts, like what if all of them were viewed as organizations or citizen groups in a broad-based coalition that is like too unwieldy to manage? But if you could point them all in the same direction together, if we had a clear call to action, we could get a massive amount of traffic. And if we could get that attention, which is the hardest thing to get in the, what people call the attention economy now, you're not competing just against your competitors, you're competing against Netflix for someone to even give you the time of day. And when they do, they probably have less than 3 seconds to decide if they're going to stick around. Nonprofits have been dealing with this problem. I had been advising nonprofits, but with these YouTubers, what I saw was I could start with an audience and reverse engineer a campaign to meet the audience where it was. And then if I could organize other YouTubers, other creators around a shared goal, then really it was like a global potluck, a potluck for good, maybe a rent party. In this case, we would raise $20 million to plant 20 million trees and also reach the hearts and minds of this audience that's grown up where YouTube and TikTok are like where people are getting their news, where they're getting their entertainment. Kids want to grow up to be influencers now, for better or worse. Like that's just what they answer in surveys. And so I saw an opportunity to build on what Mark and Jimmy is MrBeast. I wanted to build on what they were doing and extend it so that we could really fly a flag for social good in the creator economy and show what was possible when we got creators moving sort of in formation to invite their audience to do something together around shared values and towards a social good goal. And in this case, planting trees, but also talking about climate and the environment and sort of a fist bump Mother Earth style of environmentalism.
I love that. A fist bump Mother Earth style of environmentalism really puts across kind of, for want of a better word, the vibe of what you're trying to do, which is like resonate with a whole bunch of people. This is not your grandparents' flower power environmental movement or whatever it is.
Look, I got arrested in a direct action with my 90-year-old grandmother outside the Richmond Chevron refinery.
That is a really cool sentence.
Yeah. And she's an amazing lady. She's no longer with us, but it was one of the happiest days I've ever seen her in my whole life. She had lots of friends from society brunches in Houston with the wives of the oil execs. She really went on a journey to get to that point. But what I would say is that I, as an environmentalist and an activist and an organizer and a social entrepreneur at this point, I think that I'm fundamentally organized around what works. And what I've seen with climate, and I think what I'm seeing now with water, is that we're not organized enough to create the change that needs to happen. And so I'm looking for levers across my work to move things forward in a positive direction. And so my progression through the nonprofit sector to now running my own business and working with YouTubers who want to sort of go beyond subscriber counts and start looking at real impact. That's where I'm trying to continually raise the bar and also create space for more experiments, more campaigns, more projects that are led by creators and supported by experts, as opposed to experts thinking that they can tap into public participation just magically, even though they're not good at it. I'm trying to find ways to change the game because we're running out of time. And we know that everything that we do now has ripple effects for decades to come and maybe even longer. And so I feel a real sense of urgency, but that means that I have to continually reevaluate what strategies am I pursuing in my own career, in my projects, in the partnerships that I'm working on. And frankly, this was an opportunity that was too good to pass up. It's been incredible to watch TEAMTREES is still the biggest creator campaign of all time, depending on how you measure it. Even as we were doing that, people were saying, save the ocean next. And as it happened, I'd worked at Ocean Conservancy. I had a deep background in ocean philanthropy. And so I did create TEAMSEAS. We launched it 3 years later. I knew that, and I was very clear about the fact that it was not going to save the ocean. Like, these campaigns are not intended to be one and done.
No.
I wish they could, right? I wish the ocean's problems were solved by a crowdfunding campaign. But what they are is like an injection of hope and enthusiasm and fresh energy, in addition to being very tangible ways that everyday people around the world can be a part of a solution, sort of part of silver buckshot, not a silver bullet.
The visual metaphor I kind of like is that the job of a lot of this stuff is you just got to pour as many pinballs into the pinball machine as you can. Just like having all of this stuff pinging off and bells going off. And you want to create chaos in the pinball machine just to maximize the amount of kind of kinetic energy that is going on, rather than people saying, my way is the best. It's like, well, let's just run a whole load of experiments and see what happens. You said a whole bunch of really, really interesting stuff there. I just want to pause on the attention economy, because it hasn't come up on this podcast before, and it's insanely important. In many ways, it really is the new currency. And I think people sort of throw a lot of shade at Gen Z, for example, that you mentioned this idea of people wanting to become YouTubers. To my mind, it's like no different from anybody wanting to be Cary Grant back in the day. Like, these are just a new group of people that have kind of eyeballs on them. People have always wanted to be famous since famous was the thing. They wanted to be king, and they wanted to be in the movies. They wanted to be whatever, a big pop star. Like, I don't think it's any different. But this idea of the attention economy and the competition over attention, like Ezra Klein, for example, is really big into this. How do you think the people within water should be thinking about the attention economy in terms of progressing water within the consciousness of people out there in the world? Bad way of phrasing the question, but how should we be thinking about the attention economy?
Well, the length of your question indicates that you have not optimized for the attention economy.
Good. I'm very glad to be the sinner to demonstrate the way in which it is not meant to be done.
It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. The fact that long, nuanced questions don't set up a curiosity gap that can be fulfilled later on within the first 3 seconds, that in and of itself is like part of what's going on here. Like, it's not just that people are trying to get famous. It's that the platforms themselves have algorithms that are shifting the rules of the game dynamically. What I say when I talk to philanthropists, and I would probably say the same thing to water entrepreneurs, and I guess I'm going to, so here we go,
Yes.
is that your best messengers on this issue around the sector are probably hiding in plain sight. People are already talking about water all the time, or it's in the backdrop to the content that they're filming already. It's not called out. If you don't know who is influential in your sector or who is influential talking about your issues, and you're assuming that it maps to your sense of who should be on stage at a conference, then you are fundamentally misreading the landscape. And I think there's huge opportunities in bringing the expertise and the relationships and the resources that people in the sector have to the people who are doing messaging. And those may be on TikTok, those may be on YouTube, or maybe it's like someone listening to this who's been thinking, I should start a YouTube channel. Basically, like, YouTube is the world's second biggest search engine. So if you don't know what people might be searching and finding as a result, then you actually don't know your space. You're not as expert as you think you might be. I think what TEAMWATER is showing right now, with thousands of creators around the world making often very straightforward videos about water, but from a variety of creative vantage points, some silly, some serious, some historical, some food-based, some, messages from the field, like some creative engineering. There's a lot of ways to reach people where they are. And I think only a fraction of them have been explored so far. So one of the things I'm most excited about by TEAMWATER, especially since AI is now so present in a lot of our working lives, aside from the water intensity, we could talk about that. You probably know more about it than I do. But just in terms of like content analysis, we're going to have thousands of videos for water entrepreneurs and water communicators to learn from. We're also going to be able to network map who's been talking about water, who's been overperforming their usual content or underperforming, and what can we learn from how those messages were amplified, resonated, what was the audience response. This is a huge test case for water messaging. And I wish that I had had more time to do the pre part of the research, but we are running some live research right now with folks at Harmony Labs who study sort of online narratives and media. And I hope that we'll have some real lessons about what are the takeaways from TEAMWATER for water, but also for other causes and for creators themselves who are trying to advance social good issues with their own influence.
I just love that idea that you're instrumenting kind of messaging across water. This is going to be absolutely fascinating if and when. Look, Matt, you're a guy with a lot on your plate. I know this may not be up there, but it's going to be really interesting as and when you finish that work with Harmony.
Well, Tom, I should give you credit because I went around and talked to a lot of people in part of the preparation for this. And what I was looking for is sort of my superpower, which is being dumb. I'm not dumb. I'm a pretty smart guy. But like in terms of water, like I'd worked on climate, I'd worked on environment more broadly. I'd worked on anti-corruption, consumer rights, democracy reform. Like I've been around the block when it comes to good things, in my opinion, to advocate for. I thought I knew about water. I realized I really didn't. And yet every one of us knows a lot about water because it's so central to our lives. And so when I spoke to you, I was on the hunt for sticky phrases that I could use to talk about water with other people, and particularly to bridge water to people who are interested in climate or generally people who are thinking about how this world is changing and where it's going and what it means to deliver water infrastructure to people who need it for decades to come. When I spoke to you, you said something that really stuck in my head, which was water is where climate and people meet. You either have too much of it or too little. That phrase in and of itself has been one of the things that I return to over and over again. And you were the only person who said it. I feel like the other phrases that I heard were like, I was familiar with like water is life from the organizing that happened in the United States around the some of the pipeline protests. Water changes everything, obviously a great one. But I just didn't find that many like catchy things that people were saying that were immediately understandable to folks who hadn't been working in water. And I think that was the biggest obstacle that I experienced coming to water as a newcomer. It was too much insider language for other insiders. And I think that TEAMWATER, while it hasn't been perfect, and I wish we had done more narrative strategy work to sort of test the messaging beforehand, that's a lesson for next time. But I think that what we have done is find the core of it and allow creators and other influencers to essentially personalize what is a simple message about everyone deserves clean water. And whether you think it's a human right or not, that's kind of beside the point. Everyone needs it. Everyone should have it. The world set a goal that everyone will have it, and we're off track. And what's been missing? Public participation and obviously a lot of money. We're doing what we can. And I hope that this unlocks some possibilities that previously were closed off.
Seriously interesting. How important do you think that the credibility, probably the wrong word, with Jimmy MrBeast and Mark Robert being the sort of instigating figureheads of this movement in terms of getting other people to do it? Is this, like, what I'm kind of trying to drive at is that we have various celebrities that are interested in water. So Matt Damon is obviously the big one, but people don't know this, but Jason Momoa is a big water guy. I kind of wish you'd talk about it a little bit more. Is the most effective way of harnessing kind of the diaspora of actors, in your case, sort of other creators, right? Is it really important to have these very, very high profile at the core of the dissemination of a message? Because those central people lend credibility. Like, I suppose what I'm driving at is what can we learn about how to effectively drive a message out, even if we're not starting with two of the biggest YouTubers in the world?
Yeah, I get asked this question all the time. It's basically the version of what do you do if you don't have MrBeast in your corner? And most people don't, although he is very philanthropic and he tries.
Yeah, he's amazing.
I think the answer is number one, I mean, look where marketing dollars are going. It's not yes, macro influencers, like the biggest creators in the world are always going to have massive brand deals. At this point, they're actually launching their own companies and disrupting whole industries. MrBeast has his Feastables chocolate bar, which is taking on Hershey's and also trying to end child slavery in the cacao supply chain. Creators they have a competitive advantage right now because they are their own marketing department. So you don't have to pay someone else to market your business. You do it yourself and you build equity and you can disrupt whole industries. But I mean, I come from grassroots organizing, so I really believe that you don't need any of that. You can start with just a couple neighbors coming together over something that could be different in the neighborhood. And I see real power. I try to think about it as like leaderful or people powered movements. That's always been how change happens. It's very helpful to have what I would think of as like Grasstops, champions at the top who give you credibility and visibility that you might not have access to otherwise. That can be an accelerant for sure. In the case of the team campaigns, because we are activating other creators, it is a huge head start to start from within that community with people who are respected and admired and people want to associate with. If I didn't have them, I would look for who is influential with the people that I'm trying to engage, whether those are other policy experts or people in a geographic region. It's sort of who's in the sphere of influence. It may not look like a YouTuber with a global audience. It could be a micro influencer who runs a bake shop and is posting on Instagram about what snacks you can get this week. But then sometimes they say, hey, you should go vote. Or like, have you seen that awful law that's going to like make it hard to put solar panels on your roof? I think there's a lot of untapped power in regular people with audience who are posting about other things, sometimes sharing about their political beliefs or something that people could be invited into to change something. I think that generally what the nonprofit sector has gotten wrong about the influencer economy is that they've looked for people whose content waves a flag that like they're already on the team. So it'd be like, I'm an activist YouTuber, as opposed to I'm a YouTuber who happens to care about clean water. The former is a very limited pool. If someone listening to this wants to get into that pool, great. Like you could probably be one of the big fish or the best swimmers if you were like very quickly, but there's a limit to how big you're going to grow. I prefer to think about people who, if I was doing like a power analysis, which is a tool from campaigning, who are on a spectrum from our allies to our opponents. There's people in the middle who are sort of the persuadable middle, and we could either get them to like stay out of the fight, or maybe even better, we could get them to come closer to our side of support. Part of what you're doing is looking for ways to bring different constituencies, different stakeholders, different decision makers closer to your side to expand your team. And at the end of the day, with these team campaigns, I think we have the biggest team possible around broad-based values. People deserve clean water and they don't have it. If you think that's right, get on board. There's time, talent, treasure that you could be putting towards this cause. And the crazy thing that we've seen is that from the left to the right, people are coming out to support and fundraise for clean water. And it's not just who you would assume is like hugging a tree or I guess a well on this point. Like I've seen a whole broad spectrum of support, and a lot of it has scrambled some of my assumptions. And I think that's because of how universal water is and how people have an immediate relationship to it just by living their lives. And they have sense memories of being a kid and splashing their face and going out to a river or a lake, and having fun with their families. Water is like the sun that just everyone has a relationship to. The fact that it's stuck in conference rooms and PDF reports where important things are being decided, that's why it doesn't have the centrality in our communications that it deserves. But it's there in stories, it's there in our lives. What we're trying to do with the campaign is to tap into that through the best storytellers on the planet to see what's possible when people see that resulting content and are invited into something that they can be a part of with their own time, talent, and treasure, as I said before.
I think one of the things that I think a lot of people are slightly kind of surprised at because they never really look that hard is that it's sort of annoying to look at everything through the lens of Congress or whatever. But like the universality of support for water is really very striking. It's sort of the thing that everyone can agree on. And if you need to get something done, just statistically, when you're looking at the outcomes of these kind of like big votes on pieces of water legislation, it's, the average is, I don't know what it is, like 87-4 or something. Mae Stevens, who we had on this a little while ago, she has the actual numbers. But this idea of it being an idea that is so universal to everybody is immensely powerful. And that's why it's another source of frustration that we haven't really been able to harness it in the public discourse. And I'm glad I actually answered that question because this idea of you don't need it really helps to have high leverage people at the top. But the grassroots is really all about kind of coalescence around an idea. We'll put this in the show notes, but there's an amazing conversation between a guy called John Higgs And Ezra Grant, John Higgs was a guy who wrote a book about this British band called the KLF. And he wrote another book about Timothy Leary. But his kind of idea is that if you look at it from one perspective, the ideas are actually in control. With the right ideas, you can coalesce so much energy around them in order to help them self-perpetuate. You've seen examples of this throughout history, but the really weird one that he uses is Doctor Who. Is that Doctor Who is such a good idea that it pulls in all of this creative talent around it in order to maintain and perpetuate the future of Doctor Who. It's kind of this sort of weird transposition. But if we say all the right words,
we're talking about memes, right? Just in different forms.
Yeah, exactly. But it's such an interesting thing. The gap between the advantages that water has in terms of how compelling it is as a story, the way in which we all relate to it on a daily basis, and how much actually, when it comes down to it, kind of people kind of care, or at least care enough to have their actions manifest or their decisions go in the direction that we think it will do. I think it's a huge source of frustration, and it's such an exciting thing to hear you really trying to bridge that gap. But I could go down this forever, as you could probably ask, but you are an entrepreneur. I'm going to take us back to you, Matt Fitzgerald, rather than large scale ideas. This is not a normal thing to have built a livelihood around. When did you know that this was the thing? And what has enabled you to be able to kind of like build this company, this entity? Because you obviously do work beyond the team campaigns and all the rest of it. I mean, it's a pretty fascinating pursuit. How do you think about this kind of as an entrepreneur?
I've been on a choose your own adventure career path for a long time. I remember going to career services at Yale, and they were like, well, you could go to financial services, you could go to management consulting, because I was an English major, or you could do Teach for America, teach inner city school kids by getting up very early in the morning and working until late at night and doing it over and over again. And each one of those paths did not appeal to me for different reasons. Management consulting, I had seen the movie Office Space, and I was like, I do not need to use my degree to fire people. Wall Street, it just didn't vibe with me culturally. I had an ex-girlfriend who had done Teach for America in New Orleans, and she was the most organized, disciplined person I had ever met at that point. And she would come home and grade papers and then like cry a little bit and then do it again the next day. And I was like, these kids deserve better than me at the stage that I was in life. And so I looked for something else, and I kind of had to figure it out. And I was really fortunate, first of all, just to get to a college like that and to be able to commit myself to public service. From there, I ended up in a public service AmeriCorps program. I did a year of national service in the United States, working at United Way, running a youth philanthropy program with high school students and teaching them to raise and then give away money and how to think about that so that they could really be effective and also tap into the lived experience that they had as young people to guide their giving. All through that, I was like, and what am I doing next? I had no idea. I've had to reinvent myself so many times. I had a whole career in the nonprofit sector as essentially a management consultant to like advocacy groups. Then I joined a fledgling campaign called 350.org to organize the most widespread day of political action in the planet's history. That was the October 29th Global Day of Climate Action in the lead up to Copenhagen. That was what really opened my eyes to the possibilities of like using the internet to bring people all over the world into common cause at scale, and then also to collect and share digital media about what it looked like, not from a big march on Washington, but like pinpricks on a map all over the planet where people were doing something that made sense to them in their hometown, gathering with one person or just a sign, or 10,000 people in Delhi at the Red Fort, underwater in the Great Barrier Reef, or on the top of a mountain, right? Like all of these people were coming together across issues and geographies and backgrounds and saying that world leaders are meeting in Copenhagen. We need science and physics to be represented as well as the biggest oil companies. And 350 parts per million at the time was the rallying cry. That was the safety level for carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that human civilization has developed within. And just for the record, I think we're at like, north of 420. It's probably closer to 430 these days. And the government is considering shutting down Mauna Loa, which actually measures the ppm concentration in the United States. I mean, look.
Amazingly, it doesn't make the problem go away.
It does not. It does not. But we can stick our heads in the sand in the meantime. I feel like, and again, this is whenever you ask me about like this path, it tends to be long-winded because it's been such a journey. Let me rewind and just say, I tried to follow the thread of asking the question, why? why do we think this would be effective? Why is this going to change? Why would someone choose to support this? And if I couldn't answer it for myself, then I kept looking for another answer. I tried nonprofits. I probably would have stayed in nonprofit, except that Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme evaporated an organization that I was working within. And that's what led me to 350.
That is
the whole side quest. But like, yeah, through the 350 experience and this Global Day of Action, I saw the potential of the internet to bring people into these campaigns and to do digital storytelling that had a place for them at the heart of it. And from there, I followed that thread to working in ocean conservation and trying to make the ocean more famous on the internet. And then from there, I went and I worked at sort of a for-purpose agency in New York and tries to work with big companies and foundations on mission-aligned causes. I worked inside the anti-corruption movement, building cross-partisan campaigns that were really about making sure that like voters could pick the politicians, that politicians couldn't pick the voters. And every time I went around here, I wasn't necessarily an expert when I started. And that was the superpower. It was like soak up enough at the beginning to be able to be a bridge to the people who we're trying to reach, to keep an eye out for the phrases, the memorable statistics, the weird turns of phrase that someone will just say offhand in a meeting. And you're like, oh, that could be a good graphic on social media, or that could spark a whole podcast episode. Like trying to find the things that made me light up so that I could share that feeling with other people. Because one of the things that people miss about social media is that the reason that people share things is not because of the content. They share it because of how they feel when they watch the content, and they want their friends or their business network to have that same emotion, whether it's anger or awe, laughter, humor. That's what's shareable. If you start with that feeling, you can usually get someone to do something on the other end of it, and you can use that power for good or evil. But if you ignore the fact that what you're trying to communicate is eliciting no emotion, then you're just going to fail, because the only people who will be reading that stuff are people whose jobs it is to read and then to create reports of their own. That's not the terrain that I'm trying to play on. So I look for emotion, and then I try to make sure that I'm using emotion in positive ways that bring people in and don't just leave them out.
Absolutely. It's the Maya Angelou, isn't it? It's the people don't care what you say, people care how you made them feel.
That's right.
So interesting. Crap. We're coming up on time. I'm so annoyed. There are about a zillion different things I want to talk to you about. I'm not going to talk to you about one. Philanthropy and water. This is something that you're doing, and you've got extensive experience within philanthropy. But whenever I spend time in the philanthropic community, especially kind of large scale, high net worth individual kind of philanthropy, or kind of large philanthropic organizations, they're usually working on anything but water. But water is at the core of, if you don't solve it, you literally can't do anything else, whether it's gender issue, racial equity issues, economic issues, like often behavioral issues, because a lot of behavioral issues actually stem from contamination that come from clean water. Because if you can't get water right, because its opportunity cost is absolute, you're handicapping your ability to do anything else. But this is not an argument that has as yet resonated to the degree in which I hoped it would. How do you reflect now from what you know from your experience with TEAMWATER? Like, what advice do you have for people who want to move the needle in terms of other types of philanthropy?
I think that philanthropists, if you think about the incentives of a program officer, that's a job that generally lasts like 3 to 5 years that someone's in that role. They come in and they want to put a stamp on it because really, their strategy is expressed by their grant portfolio. And so there's sort of this inclination to shift. What did the other person do? Well, that's okay, but like, let's do a strategy refresh. And what I experienced in the nonprofit side of it was like, that was incredibly disruptive. I didn't see the patient capital as frequently as I would have liked. If philanthropy is supposed to be the risk capital of the social sector, but it's also supposed to be the patient capital, I think there's sort of a maybe multiple personality disorder going on. I found way more flexibility on the for-profit side of things, even though I only work with mission-aligned clients. I don't really care about the tax status at this point. I care about the effectiveness of the work and what I think crucially, like what impact it has after I'm done working on it. A mentor of mine said that the greatest change you can make is the change that happens after you're gone. That's what's sustainable. So I'm trying to set sort of the conditions for change in the water sector by launching this campaign, because I know that it's, at the end of the day, we talked about a mobilization moment. This is a mobilization moment. And then it's a big spike in attention and it'll dissipate to some extent. I hope that there's a higher baseline left behind. I hope there's more attention for everyone working on water to play with. I hope there's relationships that have been created that lead to unintended outcomes that none of us can foresee, but hopefully will be beneficial. I tried my best to make sure that we didn't leave the sector worse off, especially because we're talking about $1 being able to give one person clean water for a year. That's due to a very particular set of circumstances and a custom designed portfolio of investments that WaterAid has led. We relied on them for that. But I also made sure that in the FAQ, for example, we talked about the range of costs to provide someone with water, not just assuming that it's going to be $1 forever. That would not be good.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
Or saying that, oh, we saved the world for water. Like, well, no, we didn't. We put something positive out there that's in the right direction, but it's going to take other people picking up the flag and moving it forward, or carrying the ball forward, depending on your metaphors. I think that we have opened the world's eyes to this issue. I hope that we can keep their attention for long enough for other people to do their part and keep it going. And we hope to be here as an ally, as a network, as a community. We want to stick around for the long run. We've promised to make sure that this water infrastructure that we're building lasts for decades and continues to help people. And I hope that the kids, the young people around the world who've been so inspired by their favorite creators, entertainers, educators, making videos and social posts about this, I hope that all those kids think differently about water in their own life. And as we've seen with TEAMTREES and TEAMSEAS before it, that maybe it affects some of the choices that they make about what they work on, what they study, what they talk about with their friends and their family. And I think that that will ultimately be the legacy of TEAMWATER, and 2 million people or more will have clean water for decades. And I hope it's that combination that we see resulting. And I'm committed to sticking around and making sure that that's where we end up.
That's really awesome. I think water, it's a really interesting idea. Is that in general, people who are kind of who see it, who kind of get it, that water has a way of holding on to you and not letting go, right? People who come to work here very rarely leave. It's kind of interesting. And what you're doing, which is helping people see it, often for the first time, I think can be enormously impactful over a very, very long time. It's really cool. Matt, you are running a public campaign. Is there anything that you want to ask the listeners of the Fundamental Molecule to do? There must be a call to action or whatever it would be, but I want to give you the open space to tell our listeners to do something.
If you do one thing, go to teamwater.org and donate. If you have a position where you can get involved in a big way, we've made a big public wave of attention. We hope you can go surf. The water's great. We are here as the campaign to be an amplifier of community energy. So if you show up, you want to make a big donation on the leaderboard, all about it. Every dollar is like a year of water for someone. If you're interested in activating your networks, your company, we have ways that you can do that. You can start your own community fundraiser and track your giving. You can start what we call a brand team and do an employee giving campaign or something else. We're doing brand deals. We are out here just trying to raise money for people to have clean water, and also telling thousands of stories about water and its importance to people and to the planet. And so even if you don't want to help with fundraising, tell a story. Use the hashtag TeamWater. Help educate the people who are learning about this issue for the first time or learning more about this issue right now. This is the window. People talk about like, when is the time to talk about something? Right now is the time to talk about something. So get involved, get engaged, whether it's time, talent, or treasure. Go to teamwater.org and get started. And we are so excited to see who shows up and to see what we can do in community with one another.
Teamwater.org. All right, absolutely excellent. That will be front and center as we put this out into the world. This has been exactly as much of a pleasure as I knew it would be. Even more so, as you can probably tell, my brain is popcorning with all sorts of stuff. I'm sorry for two things. One, my crap, long, overly precise questions. And two, that we're not on YouTube. Now I feel like a right idiot. But anyway, maybe we can make that change sooner rather than later. It's been such a pleasure. We have come to our last question. We ask all of our guests, which is, if you had to choose one piece of advice for current and future water entrepreneurs, what would it be?
I'm going to draw on my campaign experience here. Being really clear about your destination is incredibly important, and holding the journey lightly, because it's going to be this way and that way. If you mapped it looking back, it would be a squiggly line. I've experienced decades of my life, my professional life, being erased with a stroke of a presidential pen. I've also watched people tapping into ideas that I've put forward with my own understanding of what could be possible. And then when other people show up, they blow my mind with what they're actually able to do. So I get so much hope from that sense of possibility that when we come together with a shared goal, we can really change things. And we don't need to know exactly how it's going to work to get started. I think if you know your North Star, if you know how you're orienting yourself, you're thinking about your own values and how you want to be in relationship to the people around you, that you can go on that journey and you can make it. As an owner of a one-person business, loves to collaborate with people, I'm figuring it out day by day, and I lean on the advice of smarter people around me who've been there before. And I'm also making it up. And at the end of the day, like, I just look back and I think I never could have predicted this path. I never could have told college me that this is the job that I would have, or this is how I would have gotten it. But I just had to build it day by day. I think that's the thing, especially now I'm in a 1-month sprint to raise 40 million. And right now we're at 15 million. Board. It's day by day. It's looking for opportunities and trying to like put out the fires before they spread into huge conflagrations. I love that dance. I love that play. I just make sure I take space to remind myself what it's for and who it's for. That's how I navigate. I think that's maybe a long-winded way of saying, like, stick with it and ask for help when you need it, because people want to be invested in your success.
I think you're really interesting. So I pride myself of having come up with an improved version of the Japanese idea of ikigai.
Yes.
Or kind of my own, because I'd never heard of it before. And then I found out about it and I was like, what? Oh, somebody already came up with this. But actually, I subtract this idea of what the world will pay you for. I think you're a really, really interesting example of the power of somebody following their curiosity and then what they're good at and then what they enjoy. And I think those are the hallmarks. Usually in the context of kind of entrepreneurship, we sort of say that those are people who are very, very difficult to compete against.
And just add what the world needs.
Yeah.
Ayanna Johnson, my friend Ayanna Johnson has been running with this in the climate movement. Like, what do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And if you can find that intersection, to simplify the ikigai, which usually has multiple spheres of intersection.
Lots of stuff going on.
At the end of the day, it's like, what's in the heart of that Venn diagram? I think that we often limit ourselves to just what's the serious side. We feel like important things have to be dry in order to be important. I found that, like, especially working with creative people who are at the top of their field, it's like, listen to that spark inside of you. It's like, if you're lighting up, if you're leaning in, if you are excited to go to work or share that idea with someone, that's the thing you should build around. Everything else is like fiddling around the edges. And maybe it's for other people to be successful in those ways, but it's not for me. So I can only speak to my own experience, but that's really at the heart of it. Like, what is that spark and what does the world need and how can I contribute?
Wonderful. That's a great place to leave it. Matt, thank you so much for being here. Really, so many congrats on TEAMWATER. We cannot wait to send this out onto the airwaves as far and wide as we possibly can. It's been such a pleasure working with you, even in such a sort of remote and kind of minor way. But really, this has been a huge pleasure. And we'll speak to you again soon. Thanks so much for being on The Fundamental Molecule.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Tom.